Even as we gain awareness that there are more than two genders, parents are still expected to put male or female on their children's birth certificates. But Corey Doty, a non-binary person in British Columbia, Canada, is resisting this rule, CBC reports. Their child was born in November and does not have a birth certificate because the government wouldn't issue one without a gender. Their health card simply says U, which Corey guesses means undetermined or unassigned, where a gender would be. As far as we know, they are the first baby in the world to have this type of documentation, according to the BBC. They're arguing that because many people don't identify with the gender they're assigned at birth, it's difficult to assign many people, such as intersex people, a traditional gender. It's unrealistic and potentially harmful to expect every child to be assigned male or female.
Transgender rights groups are praising Oregon for becoming the first state to allow a gender non-specified designation on state-issued driver's licenses, learner's permits, and ID cards. National Center for Transgender Equality Executive Director Mara Kiesling said in a statement on Wednesday, "We are thrilled to see Oregon leading the way in advancing identity document policies which allow for transgender people, including those who are non-binary, to have an accurate ID that helps them function in their day-to-day lives." She then added, "This is a tremendous first step, which acknowledges the experiences of humanity and a growing segment of the population."
On Wednesday, Malta is on track to pass a law legalizing same-sex marriage when its parliament votes. The vote signals the latest in shifting attitudes that have swept across the staunchly Catholic country since the 2011 referendum to legalize divorce. Since then, the country has introduced civil unions and last year became the first European state to ban gay cure therapy. In late June, Prime Minister Joseph Muscat said gay marriage would be one of his priorities after he won a snap election. Germany became the latest European Union to legalize same-sex marriage last week.
Whether the U.S. military can defend the United States from the growing threat posed by North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missile capability is being questioned by a growing group of people. Pyongyang's first test on Tuesday of the ICBM has a potential to strike the state of Alaska. The question has been raised: how capable is the U.S. military of knocking down an incoming missile or barrage of missiles? Pentagon spokesman Navy Captain Jeff Davis briefed reporters on Wednesday, saying, "We do have confidence in our ability to defend against a limited threat, the nascent threat that is there."
On Wednesday, Department of Defense officials said that the recent ballistic missile North Korea fired was a weapon the U.S. had never before seen used by the rogue nation. According to a spokesman, the missile, which was fired from a new mobile launch site, contained a re-entry vehicle. The spokesman went on to add that the missile is capable of traveling more than 3,500 miles, meaning it could potentially reach U.S. territory in Alaska. Despite the new capabilities, the department added that the U.S. and its allies still do not deem the missile to be a threat as of now.
Committing the United States, and have committed, but I'm committing the United States to Article 5.
To European allies, it was a reassurance that America will protect them. To Russia, a warning that any attack would incur a direct response from the U.S. military. Captain Craig Heimel told NBC News on a visit to the firing range in Poland last week, "To show the flag out here is reassuring to our allies." Heimel is a commander with the 2nd Squadron's 2nd Cavalry Regiment, a unit of about 1,000 U.S. troops that redeployed from Germany to Poland in March. They are part of a strengthened NATO force, some 4,600 troops from the U.S., Canada, and Europe that has grown along the Russian border over the past 3 years. At traditional weddings, the bride wears a white dress and the groom wears a black tuxedo. But as our society has become more open to accepting non-traditional relationships, more gender non-conforming couples have said "I do." According to Allure.com, these couples have inspired the wedding industry to create more diverse clothing options for couples who do not identify with traditional wedding garb. This is perfect because most genderqueer individuals spend their lives trying to find themselves within the limitations of strict gender binaries.
A New York City police officer was brutally killed in an ambush attack while sitting in a police RV early Wednesday. Police say Officer Miosoti's familia was killed by Alexander Bonds, an ex-convict who ranted online about supposed police brutality. Authorities say officers fatally shot Bonds after he drew a firearm at them. These ambush-style shootings are but one of many recent shootings. It's a recent trend that has disturbed law enforcement officials nationwide.
These Afghan girls worked hard just to get here. They were chosen from 150 candidates with one goal in mind: to build a robot to take to Washington to compete against teams from around the world.
We wanted to show the talent of Afghans to the world so they would know that we do have skills and should be admired.
They built the robot that can pick up and move a ball. It turns out that was the easy part. The girls won't be going to America. The U.S. Embassy denied them visas.
We asked why we'd been denied, why Afghans aren't eligible for this visa. They had no answer. We were shocked.
The girls traveled from their school in Herat in western Afghanistan to the U.S. Embassy in Kabul twice to apply for visas. Both times they were rejected.
U.S. officials say they won't discuss specific visa applications for privacy reasons. They'll only say they evaluate each applicant on a case-by-case basis, according to U.S. law.
The girls say it had already taken a lot to convince their families to be part of the robotics program and hopefully to travel to America. In Afghanistan, they're not even allowed to walk to and from school alone.
Afghanistan is a country at war and doesn't have a lot of resources at hand. Of course, other countries should consider this. They shouldn't be so strict with us.
Women's activist Wajma Fro says life is getting worse for women and girls in Afghanistan. They don't have a voice, and there's been an increase in domestic violence.
The space is shrinking for us. Yes, the space is shrinking for us. The donors' attention has really, decreased for women. They only support where the government tell them, because and only for the government-focused programs, which is not women.
The girls say they're disheartened, but trying to bounce back. Their robot has gone to the United States without them, but they hope that one day they'll get another chance to show the world what they can do. Jennifer Glass, Al Jazeera, Kabul.
After Cyril Otley-Doughty was born in British Columbia, he did not receive a genital inspections after birth. In fact, he was given a health document that did not specify whether he was male or female. The decision not to have Doughty undergo a genital inspection was inspired by the campaign group Gender Free ID. Recently, they made a public statement that their main goal is to remove all gender/sex designations from identity documents. They hope this is the start of a new non-binary movement.
On Wednesday, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley called North Korea's first intercontinental ballistic missile test a clear and sharp military escalation. According to the Department of Defense, the weapon can travel more than 3,500 miles, making it capable of reaching Alaska. Haley went on to warn that the recent actions are quickly closing off the possibility of a diplomatic solution. Haley went on to say that previous global efforts to halt North Korea's nuclear program have been insufficient to get them to change, adding that the U.S. is preparing a resolution for more drastic sanctions against the rogue nation.
A warning signal to North Korea from U.S. and South Korean forces. The combined precision-firing military exercises, a direct response to this. What North Korea says is its first successful launch of an ICBM, or intercontinental ballistic missile. Celebrations in the streets of Pyongyang as state television broadcast the news. Kim Jong-un called it a gift to Americans celebrating the 4th of July Independence Day holiday. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson confirmed the missile was an ICBM and said it represents a new escalation of the threat to the United States. The U.S. called for an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. The latest American and South Korean military drills were in direct response to the launch, but the countries also hold massive joint exercises every year. Meeting in Moscow, the presidents of Russia and China called for both sides of the conflict to take a step back.
Parallel freezing of nuclear missile activity of North Korea and large-scale joint drills of the USA and the Republic of Korea.
South Korea's President Moon Jae-in said North Korea's serious provocation required a reaction beyond just a statement, and the U.S. military said the missile system used in the joint exercises can be rapidly deployed and engaged. South Korea's unification ministry says it still wants a peaceful resolution on the peninsula, but the missile drills also appear to send the message that North Korea's neighbor can also use force if necessary.
If North Korea ignores our military's warning and continues provocations, we clearly warn that Kim Jong-un's regime will face destruction.
North Korea's state media reports that Kim Jong-un told his officials the U.S. would not have been happy with what he called their 4th of July gift, and warned there are more gift bags, large and small, to come. Kathy Novak, Al Jazeera, Seoul.
It was meant as a warning to Pyongyang. The 2 ballistic missiles fired from the east coast of South Korea were part of a joint military exercise conducted by Washington and Seoul. Officials say the drill shows their capability of targeting enemies in case of an emergency.
This joint missile launch drill, executed by South Korea and the US, is an expression of the 2 countries' firm resolution to never tolerate any kind of provocation from North Korea.
The exercise was in response to North Korea's leadership, who said it had successfully tested an intercontinental ballistic missile on Tuesday. The United States strongly condemns North Korea's launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile. Testing an ISBM represents a new escalation of the threat to the United States, our allies and partners, the region, and the world. Tillerson warned that the U.S. will never accept a nuclear-armed North Korea, but Pyongyang says its missile is nuclear-capable, while leader Kim Jong-un called the tests an Independence Day present for the U.S. Korean state media reported Kim also added, "We should deliver big and small presents often." The missile was fired under Kim's supervision and flew for 40 minutes before it landed in the Sea of Japan. But North Korean officials say it could fly even further, raising the possibility it could reach Alaska. Tillerson also warned any country that provides economic or military help to the North is helping a dangerous regime. The U.S. has repeatedly urged China, Pyongyang's main economic ally, to use its influence. On Tuesday, Chinese President Xi Jinping was in Moscow, meeting his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin. They issued a joint statement calling on the opposing sides to start negotiations. But there will be more discussions about North Korea's nuclear program at the G20 summit this week. The leaders of the United States, China, Japan, and South Korea will all be there, and North Korea's nuclear ambitions will once again be at the top of the agenda. Nafisa Latic, TRT World.
According to Reuters, a new poll reveals that 6 in 10 U.S. voters support the latest travel ban. The ban affects travelers from 6 predominantly Muslim countries from entering the United States unless they can prove they have a close relative living here. The poll, released Wednesday morning, found that 37% of voters admitted they strongly supported the new guidelines issued by the U.S. Supreme Court. The poll included 1,989 registered voters. A year before Trump's election to the presidency, he promised voters he would seek a temporary, total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
NASA is developing a spacecraft to pummel asteroids and knock them off a course for Earth. Following official approval from the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the deflection approach is moving from concept development to preliminary design. The Double Asteroid Redirection Test, or DART, marks NASA's first mission to demonstrate what's known as the kinetic impactor technique, aka striking the asteroid to shift its orbit. Lindley Johnson, Planetary Defense Officer at NASA, said, "This approval step advances the project toward a historic test with a non-threatening small asteroid."
Waiting for the world to help. But in one of Yemen's most isolated regions, aid may never arrive. Already besieged by war, people here are facing another unforgiving enemy, cholera. For months it has preyed on the most vulnerable, the frail and the weak, and it has now spread across almost the entire country. In this family, 7 children have contracted the disease.
I swear to God, I'm helpless. I'm penniless. I had to borrow money from some neighbors to treat my children. One of them died. We are all in God's hands.
After years of fighting, access to clean water is hard to find, and even when available, is also a potential killer. 250,000 people are suspected of contracting cholera. Since April, the numbers being diagnosed has sharply increased. And even though people in this village suspect the water is contaminated, it is their only source. 20 villagers have already lost their lives after drinking it, and many more are sick.
The baby is suffering from diarrhea and vomiting and on medicine now, but it hasn't stopped. We really need help.
60 kilometers away, the sanctuary of a hospital offers little hope. Here too, life hangs in the balance. Every day, new patients arrive, weak from diarrhea and malnutrition. The hospital, already crippled by years of war, is overwhelmed, and there are calls for more international action.
Every single minute, one new child is reporting sick with acute watery diarrhea. To the Yemeni authorities and Yemeni people themselves, more needs to be done to really help Yemen tackle this crisis.
The conflict in Yemen has now gone on for more than 2 years, and government forces, backed by a Saudi-led coalition, continue the fight with Houthi rebels. It has made Yemen even poorer, and in no state to deal with this latest health emergency. Cholera may be cheap and easy to treat, but a country already broken by war and hunger is unable to cope. Duncan Crawford, Al Jazeera.
On Wednesday, Deputy Prime Minister Numan Kurtulmuş told Reuters that Turkish military preparations in Syria are legitimate measures against a threat from Kurdish forces in the Afrin region. Kurtulmuş was responding to the head of the Syrian Kurdish YPG militia, who said that the Turkey military deployments were a deceleration of war. However, in an interview, Kurtulmuş said, "We are making preparations against potential threats. It's a legitimate measure so that we can protect our independence."
Some headlines have suggested Americans are facing a particularly bad year for tick bites and illnesses, but the evidence is patchy and the science is complicated. According to the Associated Press, nearly 30,000 cases of Lyme disease are reported to the federal government each year. However, experts think it's underreported and the actual number may be more like 300,000. U.S. health officials say it's hard to even know how bad things are. Rebecca Eisen is a tick expert at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. She says there's not any comprehensive data to give a clear picture of what's happening nationally. To protect against ticks, learn what kinds are common where you live. Avoid high grass, use EPA-registered repellent, and check yourself and your children for ticks daily. Remember, it only takes one tick to make you sick.
44 U.S. states have now declined to release any of the requested data or provide limited information to Donald Trump's Commission on Voter Fraud. While 19 states, both red and blue, have flat out refused to comply with the request, 26 say they plan to only hand over what is deemed public information by respective state laws. Meanwhile, 5 states say they have yet to receive the Commission's request or are still reviewing it. The panel, which was created by Trump in May, is chaired by Vice President Mike Pence and Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach.